No, that's not it. I'll tell you what the problem is. The problem is I'm walking around this place. Real nice, classy hotel. Got, spread, food, snacks, but everywhere you go, there's coffee. Little coffee stations with the creamer, the cups. It's hot coffee. There must have been 8, 9, 10 of these stations. Hot coffee, hot coffee. What if you drink iced coffee? There's no iced coffee available. They assume everyone drinks hot coffee. I do. I find it offensive. Steve Weiner here from GetRubix.com, and today we're going to take a look at setting up some custom compliance policies for Windows devices in Intune. I'm saying let's normalize iced coffee. Okay, so let's get started by talking about compliance policy overall. Why does it matter if it's custom? Who cares? What's wrong with the not custom ones? The whole deal. So I'm in Intune. I go to devices, compliance policy. So quick overview. And this does throw some people off. The whole point of compliance policies are to determine if the device meets certain criteria. For example, I have this Windows 10 11 disk encryption policy. So all these fields are criteria of which we can tell if a device is compliant. For this one, I believe system security is set. So it looks like I'm requiring encryption on the data storage of my PC. I'm requiring a TPM. Doesn't look like I have much else going on here. So this will not enforce encryption. This is just checking to make sure the device is. And if it's not compliant, right, it's going to get blocked by conditional access, where we have things set to be compliant. If we look at this jumpstart policy, I don't think I have too many of these on, but this one is a little more stringent. So if you take a look at this, it's requiring the device health. The device health has to be BitLocker, secure boot, code integrity, right? Device properties, we're setting a minimum OS. Same thing. We have some system security requirements, even more stringent. It's requiring antivirus. Again, it's not going to force it. It's going to make sure it's compliant. So the problem with this is you're limited to the options Microsoft gives you here to determine what's compliant. And these are generally good things, right? It's not like there's anything wrong here, but what if we want to be more specific, whether it's for all our devices or a specific use case? So let's talk about custom compliance and what it is. So custom compliance allows us to determine our own attributes, right? And essentially check the device to see if the attributes we want are enforced, and if not, give that a compliance flag or not. So let's talk about how it works. Okay, so switching tenants for a second, I want to show you a compliance policy that's already established, and then we'll talk about how we created it. So compliance policies, YouTube custom compliance. I guess that was my prep work. All right, so let's take a look at what we have here. So you can see here the settings are a little bit different. They're not the switches we have down there. So what it's doing is it's running a detection script that's looking for certain values. In this case, I'm looking for my autopilot tenant, and I'll talk about what that attribute is in a moment, and I require that to be equal to my rubixdev.com domain. And I'm also looking for an encryption value of 1 in the BitLocker registry. So how do we get these to Intune? What does this detection script look like? And you can see we can have several detection scripts. So let's talk about building that, right? So let's go back to my other tenant, and let's go ahead. And instead of creating the policy first, we're going to start with the script. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and write the script in Visual Studio Code, as opposed to writing it in their little console there. So I'm going to call my file custom detection.ps1. Okay. Let's open that up. Cool. Okay. So essentially what we do, so the first thing we do when we're dealing with custom compliance is we set variables. Okay. Then we create the JSON output. or an array, I guess we can call it. It's like an array. They call it a hash. It'll make more sense when we see it. And then we return and convert to JSON. All right. So what do we want to check for compliance? So specifically for my device, I'm going to be looking at two things. I want a policy that checks for two very different things. For the autopilot registration, to make sure it's registered to my tenant. I also want to check to see if an app is installed. In this case, I'm going to pick Mozilla Firefox, but it could be whatever you want. It could be some antivirus software, obviously something more critical, but we're going to go ahead with that. So how do I determine what it is? So the first thing I'm going to do is, so I'm going to do my autopilot registry path. Actually, that should be camel case. I don't know why I did that. Okay, so the autopilot registry path is get item property. What is it? The path. That's more. Get auto. I'll just do autopilot registry. Whatever. We don't have to get into all that. Get item property. Get item property path, and that will be HKLM software, Microsoft, provisioning, diagnostics, autopilot. And from there, I'm going to create a variable called autopilot tenant that's going to be equal to the registry, and the value will be the cloud assigned tenant domain. So that autopilot tenant, that value is going to give me the tenant it's registered to. Actually, we'll come over here for a minute to a demo machine. Yeah, so if I were to show you real quick, let's see, Microsoft, provisioning, yep, diagnostics, autopilot. If we look at the cloud assigned tenant domain, that gives us, so in this case, it'll be stevecapacity.com, but that's the value I'm pulling out. I just wanted to show you that. So let's flip back, and that's what that's going to give us. Now I want to look for Firefox. So how am I going to look for Firefox? So I'm going to start with a variable that sets Firefox to false. And then I'm going to do an if statement. So I'm literally going to check the path. So it should be located. Actually, we can confirm on our reference machine. Oh, we don't even have it on the reference machine. I have it on this machine. So Firefox, open file location. That's the shortcut. There we go. So I'm going to copy the path. And obviously you can use variables instead. I'm just, oh, why did it double quote it? Okay. Okay, great. So if that file exists, we are going to change the variable to true. Okay. Okay, so those are the two things we're looking for. So how do we create that JSON hash array? Okay. We're simply going to call it hash equals, it's JSON, right? So we can do this like this. So we can say so now this is very important. The names of the values are going to be, they need to match our settings in the corresponding JSON file they output to. So we'll go over that in a second. I'm going to call this autopilot tenant is equal to autopilot tenant. So that'll be the value that comes out of this variable. And then we need to do, oh, that should be a semicolon. Then I want to do Firefox installed is equal to my true or false Firefox variable that's up there. Great. So that's all I need. And then in the end, I'm going to put return the hash, but convert to JSON, and we'll throw in a compress switch. So it's going to get those two values for me, and it's going to output them in this JSON format. So I expected it to read autopilot tenant equals stevecapacity.com, Firefox installed equals true or false. Great, so that's our custom detection. So why don't we go back to Intune for a moment, and let's get that up here. So I'm going to add it as a script. We will call this YouTube custom compliance policy. Okay. Oh, and let me copy and paste it from there. So actually, I'm going to get rid of the commenting since I don't really need that for Intune. I mean, you could leave it in. I'm just want it to be kind of tidy, and I don't know if I trust Intune with comments, but you didn't hear that from me. Okay. There we go. And this part is going to be the same as running any PowerShell from Intune. So I don't want it to log on. I don't want it to run as login credentials. I want it to run in 64-bit mode. So I'm going to create that detection script. Now we have that, we can create our policies. So I'm going to create a new one. We're going to call this YouTube custom compliance policy because we're so clever. And we're going to select custom compliance. So we're going to switch that on. We got to give this two things. So we already have the script. So we're going to select our YouTube custom compliance. Now we need the JSON validation file. So what's that really? Let's go ahead and make that new file. Actually, you know what? Hold on. Let me make it here first. So that's going to be, I'm going to call that compliance.json. Yes. And we are going to open that with Visual Studio Code. Okay. So the way it basically works is we have a list of our rules. They should be in quotes. Rules. Okay. They sit in brackets, and then each rule sits in a quote, in a curly bracket. So we have two rules. Okay. The rules all need certain attributes to them. So we need the name of the setting. Okay. And we'll call that for now name of setting. Okay. We need the operator. We'll talk about that in a minute. So that's going to be or and equal to whatever. Okay. We need the data type. That's either going to be a string, a boolean, an integer, something like that. And then we need the operand. Hold on. Let's put the comma there. So this is pretty much just what the expectation needs to be. So this is the answer, right? So this is going to be the answer. Or let's say expected value. Or a better way to put this is compliant value. That's a much better way to put it. Okay. A few more things that each policy needs. We need a more info URL. So if something's out of compliance, we can provide certain information to the end user. I would just use your IT support page. In my case, I'm going to use https stevecapacity.com. And we're going to give it some remediation settings. Just letting folks know what to do if they're found non-compliant. And then those settings sit inside other brackets. And you can offer this in different languages. I'm just going to do it in English. So language, we're going to do in US. The title. So policy title and little description. This is a description of the policy, and that's it. And then we can do the same in the next one. So let's grab that. Okay. All right, so what does this have to do with what we made before? So I'm going to actually split the screen, little split screen action here. Let's get rid of this so you can see what's going on. So we basically need to tell our rules what they're expecting. So let's look at the autopilot one. So what was the name of the first setting? Autopilot tenant. So that's how it's going to know to look at that output. So we're going to make that the same name. Autopilot tenant. Okay, so we want it to be is equals. There's a link, so you can just Google Intune compliance on the Microsoft Learn page. They give you how to write these operators out. I don't think I did it right just there, but equals is equals. Now, what's the data type that's going to return? In this case, it is a string. So we're just going to put string, not my nonsense, and what's that expected value? So to be compliant, we want it to read stevecapacity.com. More info, I could leave that. Language, policy title, we're going to call this autopilot tenant registration, and a little message here, say this PC must be registered to autopilot in the stevecapacity.com tenant. All right, next one. So what was our name? It was Firefox installed. In this case, it's still going to be is equals, but it's not going to be a string. We're actually, remember what we're doing. We're returning a Boolean. So true or false. We want that to be true. So it will be a Boolean. And the value we're looking for is just true. So, it actually doesn't need quotes because it's not a string. Perfect. All right, same thing here. We got some info, title. We'll call this Mozilla Firefox required. And we can say your organization requires Mozilla Firefox web browser to be installed on this PC. Some scary legal looking language. And that is our JSON validation. So let's go back. And now we can go to the desktop. Okay, autopilot remediation to specify Firefox remediation must be specified. What did I do wrong here? So it looks like I made a mistake. Remediation settings. Oh, that's remediation strings, not remediation settings. So it's important to read the words. Maybe someone caught that earlier on. That's okay. We all make mistakes. Okay, so I'm going to save that. I'm going to re-upload it and see if it stops yelling at me. Oh, well, you stopped yelling. But this is kind of cool. Look what it does. It actually pulls out the settings, like I showed you before, from the JSON. So now, same thing. We could take actions for non-compliance, and we can start assigning this to our devices. I'm actually going to I'll add all users to it just to play with it. We'll see how it comes back. I don't think everyone has Firefox installed, but this will be an interesting one to see. And then if we go to per setting status, not per setting status, if I go back to properties at any time, we can see what it's looking for. So that's pretty cool, right? And this way, we could blend this if we want with some of the built-in stuff they give us, or we can just make this all custom ourselves. Either way, whatever you prefer. So, yeah. So this is a great example of how much flexibility is in Intune. Sometimes folks will see something like some of the predefined compliance policies and think, okay, well, this is a little limiting, or, I'm bound to what Microsoft's providing. But using the process I just showed you, you can literally make compliance anything you want, whether it's, making sure the TPM's a certain version, you have BIOS updates, or if you just want to make sure folks have World of Warcraft installed. Doesn't matter. Next time. 1, 2,